It's with great pleasure I'd like to welcome, I beg your pardon, what's happened there? There we go. I'd like to welcome Clare Randall to the stage. Clare is the second of our inspirational speakers in terms of giving their insight into their world, the opportunities, the miracle of transport being totally accessible. And so, Clare, if it's okay, I will hand over to you. Yeah. There's Jin. You okay with that?
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Clare.
If journeys were built with the visually impaired person in mind, then any journey undertaken by a visually impaired person, regardless of where they were going and how they intended to get there, would be the same in length and complexity as that of anyone who had normal vision. Thank you for having me to speak here today. I'm Clare, and I've been using public transport for about 24 years now. Firstly with a white cane, and then more latterly with a guide dog. And when I first came to use public transport, I was living in Cardiff, and I was using buses and trains. And buses were interesting back then because you had to know where you were going. It was kind of a bit of a mission to go on a bus. You had to have an idea of where you were going. You would have to pre-do the route, kind of do it with somebody first, and then get to know the landmarks. Or you go around 3 roundabouts and 6 corners and up 5 hills and a couple of speed bumps, and eventually you might arrive at your destination, but it involved concentration from A to B. And if your stop was down a straight road, then you were really, you really had to concentrate quite hard. And actually I lived off of City Road in Cardiff, which is one of the more busy roads, but it was a straight road. And if I was lucky, the bus would stop at the first stop, meaning that I knew that all I had to do was ring the bell when it got to the second stop, and that was my stop. If I was unlucky and it didn't stop there, then I would have to concentrate a bit harder. And if I was even more unlucky and missed the stop, I would end up in a part of the city I'd never seen before and have never seen since. And fast forward to 6 years ago, and I moved here into London, and here we have audiovisual announcements. And they have revolutionized the ability to travel independently, because now I can get on a bus in any part of London and travel to any other part of London. And without having ever had to do so before, I don't have to rely on people, I don't have to rely on the driver. All I have to do is wait for the audio announcement to kick in and tell me the stop that I'm going to get off at, and then I get off there. And it means that I don't have to rely on mobility to help me to find the route, the bus route. I can just set off one day and decide that I need to go somewhere, and I can have the ability to get there. And it's influenced my decision to stay in London, that access to transport, because unfortunately audiovisual is something which isn't available in much of the rest of the country. So if I moved back to Swindon, where I'm originally from, or I moved to other parts of the country, I could well end up in a position where I was going on magical mystery tours of the countryside. We have so much innovation that has come forward in the last sort of 10 years, 10 years, not only on the transport networks, but also in terms of technology. The advent of the smartphone, and with the smartphone come the apps that give us both information and navigation. We have apps such as the Train Times app, which is invaluable to be able to know where you're going, to be able to find out which trains are going from which platforms, so you don't have to ask people. But then you also have the apps which have less accessibility. Citymapper. I don't know how many of you use Citymapper, but it's one of those apps that is frustrating in its inaccessibility. I have its predecessor, which is Busmapper, and unfortunately the app has now been discontinued, but it still works. Having tried to upgrade to Citymapper, I found that it was a completely pointless waste of time, which is a real shame because it gives you access to the underground, it gives you access to train networks, it gives you access to bus times, it tells you about traffic delays, and all of those things would be incredibly useful if only I could access them. Another thing that's changed in terms of innovation in the past 10 years is ticketing. And ticketing on trains has been automated to a large extent. We have ticket machines in most stations now, which means that you can buy the ticket from the comfort of your own home using an app such as the Trainline or similar, and you can then, it will then give you a code. And then all you have to do is go to the station, go to the ticket machine and type in a little number and it gives you your tickets. Except that if you can't see, you can't access it. They're all touch screens. They have no accessibility whatsoever, and there's never been any attempt to make them accessible ever since they became available. And one of the problems with that is that so many stations now are unmanned that it means that if you are buying tickets and you are needing your tickets, you have to go down to a ticket office and you have to purchase those tickets in person, meaning that you potentially have problems if you live in an area which has an unmanned station. Case in point is this morning I got to Orpington station where I live and I realised I'd left my contactless debit card at home. And I was fortunate, I was able to go up to the ticket office and I was able to buy a ticket. However, if I'd lived in Pettswood, which is the next station along, Pettswood is unmanned and I would have been in trouble because I couldn't have gone to the ticket machine and actually bought that ticket. We also have navigational apps and navigational technology. Wayfinder, somebody else referred to Wayfinder. Wayfinder is, it's like iBeacon technology. So you can install Bluetooth beacons and they're in and around the area you want to make accessible and then link them into your navigational apps. Blind Square is my navigational app of choice. And if you are here today and you have a smartphone, they have actually set up a trial of this event, of the actual Blind Square app. You need to download an app called Blind Square Event, and then you can have a look at it. It may not mean that much to you because you're not au fait with some of the technology, but it's worth having a look at if you're interested. But the way that it works is it means that we then have the ability to access pieces of the station without, or any premises really, but we'll talk stations for the sake of this, any part of a station or a public transport hub for the sake of, without having to rely on things like assistance. Assistance is great when it works. Unfortunately, it does reduce one's ability to be spontaneous because there is more and more of a requirement to book assistance 24 hours in advance. And in fact, I have gone into assistance offices at stations and been told, you need to book next time. Yes, we'll help you this time, but next time you need to book. Here's this card, make sure you put it in a safe place and make sure you ring it next time, 24 hours in advance. I don't have a problem with being flexible, but sometimes it would be nice to not have to work to a timetable and be able to leave my house at a certain time or take account of train delays at my end before I get to the destination where I need assistance. All of these things would run hand in hand in order to be able to make my journey accessible from A to B without having to be reliant on either people. And I have no problem with being reliant on people. I know there's been a lot of emphasis of human interaction. But one of the downsides to that is that many of the systems now are becoming less humanized. For example, TfL, on the underground, they're closing a lot of their ticket offices and staffing is becoming less. There are many unmanned stations across the country. The downside to that is that if you're booking assistance, they will actually refuse to allow you to travel to an unmanned station and will insist that you go to the next station and then be put in a taxi. And so while I think that the interaction with human beings is crucial in our everyday lives, I think the reduction of those human beings on the ground makes it more difficult to travel accessibly. Of course, we are looking at other technology now, such as cars, which people talk about, autonomous driverless cars, and there's a lot of talk about where those will go. Will the visually impaired person have access to driverless cars and be able to not have to use the public transport networks? I think we're a long way off that, and I think that those are the thoughts of the future, maybe not my future or your future, but somebody else's future. And in the meantime, we need to be looking at how we can make the systems accessible now so that my journey from A to B is no longer and no more arduous than anybody else's journey from A to B. I look forward to the day when I can get into my driverless roles and go from A to B. But for now, I think I will have to go to my local train station buy my ticket, which I have pre-purchased from whichever app I choose and picked up at my ticket office, and hopefully use my iBeacon technology through Blind Square, etc., to navigate to the platform. A seamless process. Thank you.